Well, thank you for these kind words, and let me thank ACOP for this invitation. And first of all, congratulate you with the 10th anniversary. The 10th anniversary normally is the beginning of getting of age, but I see all of you very mature and very grown up. But I think it's a crucial thing to see. Good luck for the next decades. I think political communication is essential for what we are doing, and so I think my speech, I'm not a public communication man, as you must have learned by now, in public administration. So I changed my PowerPoint a bit because of what I heard yesterday. It's called flexibility. It's also, communication is also listening, isn't it? It's, and I will refer to I think the most recent survey on Democracy Perception Index, which is conducted by the Rasmussen Global Foundation. Rasmussen is the former Secretary General of NATO, and he's very concerned about democracies. And it's also together with the alliances of democracies. So let me give the key results of that, because I think it's also about communication issues, and some of the presentations this morning referred to that. And this is a quote: "Democracies are losing the hearts and the minds of their citizens." The world's largest study on trust in government, it's about 125,000 people have been surveyed in about 50 countries. And I will give you the key results, just 2 slides before I start my own interpretation of this, actually. So it's about political voice, the sense of participation in politics, the public interest. It's about trust that government is working for the people. It's about free speech, freedom of expression of opinions, and about information, so the access of balanced and neutral information. Now let me show you some of the key results. It's only showing one table. So on these 4 dimensions, with a kind of division between free countries and not so free countries, on the question, do you feel that voice of the people, that the voice of the people like you matter in politics? In the free countries, so what is the percentage of the people saying that it's never or rarely the case that they have political voice? In the free countries, 54%, in the not so free countries, 46%. On public interest, do you feel that your government is acting in your interest? 64 says it's never or rarely happening, 41% in the not free countries. On the question, do you feel like the news you read or watch gives you balanced and neutral information? In the free countries, 57% says that's never or rarely the case, 54% in the not so free countries. On the 4th question for freedom of discussion, do you feel to share your opinion on political issues in public events if most people disagree with you? While in the free countries, those that say never or rarely, it's 43, and in the not free countries, 47. So the conclusion of this study is that the global public does not think their governments are delivering core democratic benefits. Citizens in democracies don't feel their voice matters. Public disillusionment is greater in democracies than in non-democracies. I think that's a quite shocking conclusion. Citizens across the world don't trust the news they read, and citizens don't feel free to share political opinions in public. All right, I think that's a bit of a wake-up call, isn't it? Let me try to interpret this a bit from my point of view, which is a public administration point of view. And I will talk about performance, trust, and communication, and how they may interact or not interact. And of course, it's also about the negative cycle of misperformance, distrust, and miscommunication. And then I use the famous French word, is it a ménage à trois? I'm sure you know in Spanish what ménage à trois could be. What are the major political issues? What are the major issues from a government point of view in our Western liberal democracies. There's a debate, a huge debate, on whether the public sector is part of the solution or whether it's part of the problem. These are two kinds of paradigms which are very confronting and which, of course, are ideologically based, but which are cascading down in the practice of governments and so the practice of the governments, I should say. A second issue is legitimacy. The word was mentioned in the introduction. The legitimacy classically had to do with the state of law, the respect of the state of law, the Rechtsstaat, l'état de droit. I think increasingly we see there is pressure on the Rechtsstaat, l'état de droit, the state of law. If you look at Poland, Hungary, some other countries perhaps. The second is, of course, elections. That's part of legitimacy too. The second key point to corroborate legitimacy. And of course, we all know that there is pressure on elections and the campaigns, the big data issues, the Russian connections, and so on. So there's a kind of pressure on the election side too. And the third issue for legitimacy is to what extent are problems solved? To what extent does the population recognize that exactly this public sector is part of the solution and has the capacity to solve problems? And I would want to add the third point here. It's not just that problems must be solved, they must be seen to be solved. That's a communication issue, of course. Must be seen to be solved. And that's a crucial element too. I mean, the biggest frustration in the public sector is, of course, to say, actually, we are quite effective in many fields, but there is a perception that is not the case. So to be seen to solve problems is a crucial element. And so this results in the kind of scheme I want to propose to you, this triangle between performance, trust, and communication in a context of a public sector, in the context of a society. And the dynamics here. These are all positive words: trust, performance, communication. Sometimes I ask people, who is against quality? Nobody's against quality. That means that we all have different definitions. Who's against trust? Well, we should not blindly trust, so we qualify it. Who is against performance? People will say, depends on what it means. Well, of course, here I shouldn't ask the question, who is against communication? Here, I think that's an obvious one. But let me go through these, not in detail, but sufficiently to feed the debate on the interactions here. So performance, the word performance, also in French, performance, actually has a double meaning, which is very relevant for this audience here too. Performance is not just results, something tangible. It's also putting something on stage. When you go to a jazz or opera or whatever, you say that was a good performance. So putting something on stage is a crucial element. And if we talk about improving the public sector, it's actually not just about improving the tangible results, it's also about improving the capacity to put it on stage, to show it, to make it visible. So many of the reform instruments that have been imported and in the public sector, from Finland to New Zealand, I'm talking about OECD countries here predominantly, has been to make results more visible. And there are many techniques that have been used there. And so it's actually the challenge is to increase the performance of increased performance. It's to enhance the visibility of increased results. And that's a crucial element which is actually a perfect match between tangibilities of results and communication. In a democracy, it's a bit difficult, or there's a caution here, well, because it should not be window dressing, it should not be manipulation. Yesterday, we saw a good example of propaganda. So there is a kind of red line in a democracy here. But the question is, how is the red line moving? Because the red lines are moving in our liberal democracies. And so we see that the concept of performance is changing and adjusting too. It's from initially inputs, activities, outputs. It's, let's say this is more productivity, efficiency thinking. But then we added outcome, impact. That's more about effectiveness. I'm not going to bother you with too many definitions here. But then trust was also put on the agenda and on the radar of a performing system in a way. Systems become performing if they are trusted. Also the use of quality, because some of the quality debates have been extended to satisfaction debates. And of course, then it's a sequence. The difference between quality and satisfaction is perception and expectations that is added. And so we see that the whole managerial exercise in the public sector moved from quality management to adding perception management, adding expectations management, up to satisfaction management. But even there, we went one step further to say, what is the link between satisfaction and trust? Is it the case that people are more trusting if they are satisfied? I will show you a table on that, an empirical table. The jumping from satisfaction to trust is perhaps too big of it's a quantum leap. It is not necessarily the case. Actually, the research demonstrates that if people are satisfied because of the service deliveries and the impacts, they are not necessarily more trusting. However, if they are dissatisfied and with the delivery, then it's quite clear that trust will decline. And so it's an asymmetric situation, which you clearly can observe empirically here. We also talk about depth of performance, and I'm elaborating that because I will make the connection to communication, of course, I hope. Micro-performance is really the transaction. You know, I take the bus, I post a letter, and that should function properly. It's really the face-to-face almost at a window, and the way that people interact. That level of communication is crucial, of course. If you have trust research, you will see that sometimes people in general, they say, oh, well, we don't trust the public sector. However, the civil servants I know, my neighbor, whatever, I trust them. I know they work hard, they're sincere, etc. So there's a kind of division here. The micro level is a crucial level. It's a transaction level. And at the performance here is crucial, so we should focus on that. The meso level is the policy level. It is about the performance of unemployment policies, environmental policies, security policies. And so that the performance there is also a crucial element. And the macro performance is a systemic performance. So, you know, to what extent does the country function? And that's the major judicial functions, political functions, decision-making functions, which we have here. And so this is an important element, and that brings us to the trust issue here. And trust, of course, is a very complex, scientifically complex concept because it's cause and effect at the same time. That's actually a simple summary why it's scientifically complex. It's cause and effect at the same time. Most of the trust research is actually about society vis-à-vis the public sector. Do you trust the public sector? Whether it's political or civil service is a derived question here. So I call that T1, so from society and the public sector. There are two types of trust that are actually under-researched and almost neglected. It's the trust level of the public sector in society. And the third is the trust within the public sector. Now, why is this important, this distinction? And of course, it's also about communication and the interfaces here. I will come back to that in a second. Well, the classical, of course, T1, we don't have too many data on that. It's disrupted data. It's not fine-tuned data. And so that makes it in itself already difficult. But T2 is important because I will give an example here why between high T2 and low T2. So the trust of the public sector in society. When you take the public transport, in some countries, you just walk into the station, you walk into the train, you walk in the train, you walk off the train, you walk out of the train station. Like that. And the system assumes you have a ticket and you're not cheating. In Switzerland, it's the case, but when you're in the train station, you will find communication, a poster saying, if you don't have your ticket, you are cheating the state. You are stealing from the state. Other systems are different. You have to pass a guard to get into the station. You have to buy your ticket. You have to show your ticket to get on the platform. You have to show your ticket to get on the train. You have to show your ticket in the train. You have to show your ticket to get off the train. You have to show your ticket to get out of the station. It is a totally different type of system. So I think you immediately understand this is a kind of organization of public services which immediately has to do with inspections and to what extent trust of a system in society is actually impacting the organization of the service itself. And it affects not just the performance, it also affects the communication, and it affects the trust systems there. Trust within the public sector is, of course, also a crucial element. It's the trust between ministries, the trust between politics and administration, the trust between central government and local government. And all of that is important to see to what extent, if you want to have a governance which is based on public-private partnerships, partnerships in general, between actors in society, then the funny thing is that the public sector says, I want you to trust me, but of course I don't trust you. That's a bit of disequilibrium. And then, of course, the private sector or the NGOs or the citizens will say, well, you want me to trust you, but you don't trust me. And it's even worse, within the public sector, you don't trust one another. So that's a very bad base for a partnership here. And so the whole communication issue is impacted by these, let's say, different levels of trust, of course, immediately. And that affects the performance of the systems immensely. And so that's why this triangle of performance, trust, and communication is interfering and is in tension. And that's why it's a ménage à trois. Does it really fit together, this kind of thinking? Perhaps three additional elements on trust, and with some reference to communication here too. Trust, in the trust research, we make a distinction between three, let's say, elements. There's the trustworthiness, which is the kind of base. Then we have the passive trust, which are the attitudes, and we have active trust, which is the behavior. I think it's important to distinguish between these. And active trust is really what people are doing. Passive trust is what people think and want to do, and perhaps do. And the trustworthiness, of course, let's say, the basis of it. There are three major bases for trustworthiness: ability, benevolence, and integrity. I think, again, the three have to do with communication. Ability, you trust your doctor because you trust he or she is able to do his or her job. You're not a doctor yourself, so you trust, and it's a trusting element. This ability is important. So the visibility of ability, the perception of ability, the the communication of ability is a crucial element here in a process of building trust. Benevolence is goodwill, as opposed to bad will. So benevolence is really, this is like a good atmosphere and a good environment with good values. And so that's a reason, good enough a reason to be trustworthy. And again, to construct benevolence as a perception requires a lot of communication. And the role of the press can be very important here. The third is integrity. And again, integrity is a crucial element. I will come back to that too. This integrity can be at different levels here. We immediately think of corruption, of course, but it's more than corruption. It's beyond that. But the element of demonstrating integrity requires a very fine communication on facts and on behavior. And it's important that leadership is walking its talk. And so the integrity of leadership is extraordinarily important to communicate the integrity of organizations. So that's an important element that we should distinguish too. I will tell you that the basis of sharing information, we had a PhD on sharing information in the judicial system. There are three types of information to be shared or not to be shared. It's compulsory sharing of information, voluntary sharing of information, and sharing forbidden information. So, and the basis, the three different trust bases are that for compulsory, you trust information because you trust it's based on ability. The voluntary, so you share it, but you don't need to share it. It's based on benevolence. We also see that in the judicial system, at least in the Belgian case, it was on youth, that there was forbidden information that effectively was shared. It was in the interest of the child. He said, I will give you information, I'm not allowed to give you this information, but I still will give it to you for you to make the right decision. It's based on integrity. And so you see that to play on these different trust levels or these trust bases affects the behavior of sharing information and communication. So the communication effort is based on different dynamics of trust in complex governance arrangements here. I've been talking about trust. Of course, there is also distrust. I will come back to that too. So communication, ultimately, if you look, we can say there is micro-communication. It's between individuals. It's between someone who delivers and someone who receives a service. And there are many mechanisms that have been put in place in the public sector to strengthen this communication. Participation is one of them. The participation mechanism, as a reform strategy, has as an implication that the communication is more intense. We also have the quality models that do emphasize relationships with customers and clients or citizens. And again, this is about communication at the, let's say, the transaction level itself. So that's an important one to affect the performance of systems and the trust levels of systems at this micro level. So the micro trust connects to the micro performance of the transaction and implies micro communication. And that's very important because that's like the first line of defense, is the first aid type of communication, is the direct communication with a civil servant. Whoever he or she is, it can be a policeman, it can be a doctor, it can be a judge, it can be an employment facilitator, mediator, etc. The meso level is a different story. The meso level is about policies. I mentioned employment, environment, security policies. Here again, we see the partnerships are different partnerships. It's partnerships of the public sector with NGOs, for example. That's more institutionalized, or with the private sector, or with districts and cities. And that's a different type. It's more institutional or inter-organizational partnerships. And that, of course, benchmarking is another one to compare, to communicate results. And so again, you see that the meso performance is connected to the meso trust levels, is connected to the meso communication intensity. And again, there has been effort. What we see in public sector reform from Finland to New Zealand is that this meso level is very important, has been emphasized, and this interaction of performance, trust, and communication is very clear. It's very clear. And then we have the macro level of communication, which interferes and interacts with the macro performance and the macro trust levels in society. This is about systemic communication arrangements. How is this organized? This is really about systems of open government, for example. And again, within the OECD, it has been emphasized open government, again from Finland to New Zealand, and the OECD has been organized actively and in a very conscious way to facilitate and to push macro performance of systems and to make sure that the trust levels at least are not decreasing anymore. And therefore we need these macro communication strategies here. So I think I'm trying to show you that this interaction between performance, trust, and communication is actually a very logical one, and as a model should be emphasized here. And so, of course, we can then have the interactions organized, investigated, Does good performance lead to increased trust? Question mark. Is it the case that increased performance leads to increased trust? You know, I'm increasing the capacity to put it on stage and having better results. Does it lead to increased trust? How can we trust communication? How can we trust communication on performance? How can we trust communication on trust? I think these, again, are very fundamental questions which are affecting the quality of our systems and that have affected so far. We probably didn't do a good job so far because otherwise the statistics I showed you at the beginning of this presentation are actually not very encouraging. Let me show you one more statistic. It's based on research we did in Belgium, in Flanders. We asked people, how satisfied are you with public services and do you trust the public sector? And again, the communication component is very strong. So it moves from little, average to high, and the trust also from little, average to high. Here you see that in average, the people are more satisfied than trusting. I also put some labels: loyalty, voice, and exit. This is the classification of Hirschman. How do citizens behave? Well, they can be loyal, they can raise their voice, or they can exit. Let me focus on the exit first of all. How is exit visible in our societies? It is visible through extreme voting behavior or non-voting behavior, massive shifts to populism, but also hooliganism, internal migration in the country, internal migration, like from South Italy to North Italy, and migration in any case, from outside Europe to inside Europe and within Europe too. So there is a group within our societies. So in the Flemish case, it's 11.7% of the surveyed people, and so we assume from the population, which is a very hardcore group. And the question is, what is the percentage we have here? They are dissatisfied and distrusting. In the UK, there have been efforts to see who are these people, and in the cities, and try to get in touch with them through focus groups. That's not always easy because the privacy legislation doesn't always allow from a survey to find out who they are. So that's a bit of a technical, legal question. In the Flemish case, the only variable that they had in common, these people, was that they were voting for a racist party. That's the only thing they had in common. And so that's something that we need to know. The Voice is an interesting group because it means that these people, at least, they complain, they strike, they write letters to the editor, they post things on the web, they have blogs, they communicate, they tweet, and they voice their concerns. I think that's a very, it's a one quarter here in this survey. So I think that's a very nice target group that should require a special type of communication again. And then we have the loyalty group. These are elderly people, so this percentage will atrophy naturally. So that's probably not the good news I have to share with you. But it's interesting to have such a table because I think the communication strategies have to be diversified according to these target groups here. And certainly exit, voice, and loyalty have different needs in the communication strategies of the public sector and of society in general here. OECD also developed a framework for citizens and serving citizens, which is about access, responsiveness, and quality. One of the interesting elements in the OECD statistics is that they are shifting to indicators on exclusion, or inclusion if you want. And so the exclusion issue becomes a crucial element again, because exclusion at the service level is about parts of cities that feel abandoned, the rural areas that feel abandoned, or certain minority groups, which are not necessarily quantitatively minorities, that feel abandoned. And so they have a perception and an experience that they are not part of the service delivery, that the governments and the civil servants are not responsive, and if they get service, that it is lower quality. And so it's very important, again, in this triangle of performance and trust and communication, that the target groups that feel excluded are integrated here too. And access is an important one. It's not just physical access, geographic proximity, it's also affordability, which is an element of access, and access to information. Here too, we see that there is a major job to do in communication to make sure that citizens get the services they deserve and they want to have here. Let me move to the, let's say, a negative triangle, which is a bit of a concern too, in a way. It's performance versus misperformance, it's trust versus distrust, it's communication versus miscommunication. And that will lead actually to this negative triangle. I showed you the positive triangle initially. It's miscommunication, distrust, and misperformance as a kind of diabolic type of triangle. So this is about waste, inefficiency, and effectiveness. This is about, if we talk about distrust because of a logic of inappropriateness, inappropriateness means that individuals, organizations, and policies are inappropriate. Individual inappropriateness is, of course, individual corruption, conflicts of interest. Organizational inappropriateness is lack of openness, lack of transparency, lack of due process, a lack of a culture of serving, of being responsible, of being accountable. Policy inappropriateness is about inequality, exclusion, and abandoned regions and populations. And of course, then we have miscommunication. I think there were some examples already in this morning. I mean, there are three, in the way that the public sector can look at it is, the truth is always complex to communicate. Lies are easy to communicate. I mean, the example, Brexit, the word Brexit was the 350 million which were on the bus, on the double-decker bus, 350 million. So there were studies, of course, the National Audit Office said, it's not true, the figure is not true. And then the people said, so what is the right figure? That was a bit of a question. What is the right figure? Nobody could say it. You say, well, it depends if we include this and that and so and this. I said, all right, so you don't know it. So why is 350 million wrong as a figure? The truth is complex, lies are easy. There's a second reason, it's important, people want to hear and see what they already know and what they already trust. So there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecies here. And the third is, of course, that repetitions of messages do work. And that leads to this kind of negative triangle. And we see, actually, if we look at the space in which we are behaving as a society, I mean, the tensions are not just within the triangles, the tensions are between the triangles, and perhaps we are shifting. I mean, the survey I showed you at the beginning of this PowerPoint, this presentation, shows clearly we are moving from this communication, performance, trust triangle to a kind of misperformance, distrust, miscommunication triangle. And of course, we should not let it go like this. We should try to, as scientists in social sciences, there is always a normative question. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to surface our normativity here. So if we are convinced that the first triangle is better than the second triangle, we have to develop, based on our research, the mechanisms that could function to stay in the triangle of performance, trust, and communication. That means, in my opinion, these are some suggestions here, that we have to share and learn good practices. It sounds obvious to say, but it's not easy to do, but I think it's a very important thing. We have to share and learn good practices of mechanisms that do function. We have to have civic education for the general interest, especially for the youngers. We have to actively organize citizen participation, not as a, let's say, a nice-to-have thing, but as a core element of our design of public services. We need partnerships and networks, which then lead to the governance, which is important here. We need to combine logics of consequences, which is about the results, with logics of appropriateness, appropriate behavior of individuals, of organizations, of systems. Also, we need reliable data and information quality. And I think from the public sector point of view, efforts have been made to do that. The European Commission has has actually enforced all countries to have a high statistical authority. The high statistical authority, or high authority of statistics, if you wish, has to guarantee the reliability of data. This is a crucial element. You cannot underestimate the importance of that. The worst thing that can happen in a society is that you start distrusting the figures. That is terrible. And so in the UK, there was a certain moment in time, there were like figures on how good everything was, and people said, our experience is totally the opposite. We start distrusting the figures. That's really something to avoid. So the high authority of statistics is a crucial. Audit offices are important. External audit offices, they need communication about that. Universities and their independent research is important. Also, independent research journalism is crucial for the credibility of systems here. And this is not just because I'm kind to the organizers here and attend Anniversary, I really believe we need more solid research on political communication. I really believe it's actually not an element that is going to disappear. I understand the games are changing, the rules are changing, but political communication becomes so center in the whole story that you have to take your jobs, and you do that very seriously. And so that's why I'm very happy to be here, and I wish you good luck in Spain and beyond for the next decades in your teaching and your research on political communication. Thank you very much.